The appraiser called me the night before the auction, and I could tell she wasn't supposed to. "Mr. Ellison? It's Vivian from Harmon's auction house. I need to tell you something, and I'd lose my job if anyone knew I called." I told her to go on. She took a breath. "Your son has consigned your late wife's paintings. All of them. Lot 40 is her big one. The field one. They go up tomorrow at noon." My chest went tight. She wasn't done. "And Mr. Ellison, he told our staff to seat you at the back. He said you get confused, that you might make a scene. I couldn't let you walk in blind. Not you. Not after everything you've quietly done for this house." I sat down slowly in my kitchen. My son was selling Eleanor tomorrow, and he had no idea who he was selling her to. Welcome back to the Forgotten Parent. Grab your coffee, get comfortable, and remember the people in these stories had every chance to do right by the ones who raised them. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment, and be sure to subscribe. You're going to want to stay till the end. My name is Horace Ellison. I am 74 years old. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, in a house full of books and quiet. I drive a 1991 Volvo wagon the color of a rain cloud. I wear a tweed jacket with a patch on one elbow that my wife sewed on 20 years ago. I have never replaced it. I taught high school art for 30 years and framed pictures on the side. If you saw me at the coffee shop, reading with my wire glasses down my nose, you'd think there's a retired teacher with a small pension. You'd be half right. I am a retired teacher. The pension is small. But I want to tell you a secret, and you'll need it later, so hold on to it. I have a very good eye. I always have. It's the one gift I was given. I can look at a painting and know, in my bones, whether it's alive or dead. For 50 years I bought art, quietly, not the famous names, the overlooked ones, the ones nobody else believed in yet. I bought them cheap, and I was patient, and I was right, again and again, and the little collection in a climate-controlled room across town became worth a great deal of money. A great deal, more than my son could imagine. But I never spent it loudly. I never wanted the money. I wanted the paintings, and I gave most of them away, in the end, to a museum, anonymously. There is a wing with no name on it that is full of things I found beautiful. That is the richest a man can feel. To fill a room with beauty and keep his name off the door. Let me tell you how it started, because it tells you who I am. I grew up poor in the mountains, dirt poor. But when I was 16, a traveling teacher hung a print in our schoolroom. A field of haystacks, by a Frenchman I'd never heard of. I stood in front of it during lunch every single day for a month. I didn't have words for what it did to me. It was the first time I understood that a flat piece of paper could hold more truth than the whole loud world. I decided then that I would spend my life near beautiful things, even if I had to be poor to do it. And I was, for a long time. I bought my first real painting at 24, $30 I couldn't spare, from a widow selling her husband's work. It hangs in a museum now. It's worth more than my house. But that's not why I bought it. I bought it because it was alive. I met Eleanor at an art supply store in 1970. She was buying cheap brushes and apologizing to the clerk for how cheap they were. I told her a real painter can work with a stick and mud. She married me 18 months later. We never had much money, not the kind Clayton wanted. We had a little house and 2 rooms full of canvases and 50 years of morning light. I taught kids to see. She painted. And on the side, quietly, with my strange good eye, I found overlooked artists and bought them cheap and waited. I was patient the way only a poor boy who loves beauty can be patient. Over 50 years, that patience turned into something worth millions, but we never changed how we lived. Eleanor kept painting fields nobody bought. I kept my patched jacket. The money was never the point. The money was just proof that my eye was true. The auction house knew me. Not as Horace Ellison, the retired teacher. They knew me as a private account. A collector who bid by phone, or through Vivian, who never came to the parties, who they called Mr. E. For 30 years I was one of the most important buyers Harmon's ever had, and almost no one there had ever seen my face. That is exactly how I wanted it. Remember that. It's coming. Now let me tell you about my son. His name is Clayton. Clayton is 46. Clayton has always been embarrassed by me. I don't say that with anger anymore. It's just true. He grew up wanting the shine I never had. Nice cars, nice watches, the right restaurants. He looks at my Volvo and my patched jacket and he sees failure. He has spent his whole adult life trying to look like money, and spending money he doesn't have to do it. And for the last few years, Clayton has been circling, asking about the house, asking, with that careful, casual voice, what my situation was. I always changed the subject. I never told him about the collection. I wanted to see who he'd be if he thought there was nothing to inherit. Now I know. The signs were there for years. I just kept looking away, the way a father does. When Eleanor was in hospice, Clayton visited twice. Twice, in 11 weeks. But he asked me 4 separate times whether the house had a mortgage. At her memorial, he spent the reception on his phone in the corner, doing what I now understand was research on her painting's resale value. His own mother's memorial. I found out later he'd already gotten 1 canvas appraised while she was still alive. While she was still painting. He'd been circling that storage room in his mind for years. Waiting, I told myself, he grieved strangely. I am very good at telling myself things about my son. It is the last soft place in me, and he has stepped on it his whole life. A father will invent a decent version of his child and defend it against all the evidence. I defended mine right up until the phone rang the night before the auction. My wife's name was Eleanor. She passed 4 years ago. And Eleanor, you should understand, was the real artist in our family. Not me. I had an eye. She had the gift. She painted for 50 years, in the spare room, in the mornings, with the light coming in. The world never noticed. She sold a few here and there, at church sales, for almost nothing. She used to laugh about it. I'll be famous when I'm dead, Horace, she'd say, so I won't get to enjoy it. She painted fields, mostly the Blue Ridge in every season. And in her last year, sick, thin, she painted 1 final canvas. A wide golden field at dawn. She called it Morning Field. She finished it 3 weeks before she died. It is, and I say this as a man with a very good eye, the finest thing I have ever owned. It is worth more than money. It was the last thing her hands ever made. When Eleanor died, I couldn't bear to hang her paintings. Too much. So I put them in the storage room across town, next to my collection, and I told Clayton nothing about any of it. Grief made me quiet. That was my mistake. Because Clayton, it turned out, had gone looking. He found the storage unit in the estate paperwork. He found a room full of paintings. And instead of calling his father, he called an auction house. He didn't know what my collection was worth. He didn't care what his mother's paintings meant. He saw canvases he could turn into cash. And he consigned all of it, Eleanor's life's work, and a piece of my private collection he grabbed, too, under his own name, to sell to strangers. To fund, I later learned, a boat. A boat. My wife's dying masterpiece, and 40 years of her mornings, sold to make a down payment on a boat. I want you to sit with the specific cruelty of that. Not the money. I don't care about the money. It's that he reached into the 1 room where I kept her, and he carried her out to be sold, and he didn't think twice, because he'd decided long ago that his father was a broke old fool who wouldn't understand. He talked about me to the auction staff like I was already gone. My dad's not really with it. He might get emotional. Just keep him in the back. Some of you know that sentence. He's not really with it. It's what people say right before they take something from you that isn't theirs to take. I want to speak to you directly for a moment, because I know some of you have been the person in the back of the room. Maybe not at an auction, maybe at a family dinner, a holiday, a hospital, the place where your children discuss you in the third person while you sit right there. Dad's not really with it. Mom doesn't understand these things. Just keep him in the back. There is a special ache in being treated as furniture in your own family, in being managed instead of asked. I taught 30 years of teenagers to see what's really in front of them. And my own son looked at me every day of his life and saw a patched jacket and an old car and decided that was the whole story. He never once wondered what a man with a very good eye might have quietly built over 50 years. He never asked. Asking would have meant seeing me, and it is so much easier to sell what you refuse to see. Do not let anyone put you in the back of the room and call it kindness. You know what you are holding, even if they never bothered to look. If you've made it this far, do me one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you. Genuinely. Now let me tell you about the auction. After Vivian's call, I did not sleep, but I did not rage either. I have learned that rage is a fire that only burns the man holding it. Instead, I got very quiet, and I made a plan. And the plan was simple. I was going to that auction. I was going to sit in the back, where my son wanted me. And when Eleanor's paintings came up, I was going to bring them home. All of them. Whatever it cost, because there is money, and there is Eleanor, and they are not the same currency. I called Vivian back in the morning. I told her I'd be attending in person, as myself, for the first time in 30 years. There was a long silence on the phone. Then she said, softly, Mr. Ellison, do the others know that you're that Mr. E? As I told her no, and I'd like to keep it that way until the right moment. She understood immediately. Vivian is a professional, and more than that, she is a decent person, and she had spent 30 years handling my account with total discretion. She said, it would be my honor to run this room for you tomorrow. I have found that quiet decency tends to recognize itself across a distance. I put on the tweed jacket, the one with Eleanor's patch. It felt right to wear her stitching to bring her home. The auction hall at Harmon's is a grand old room. Chandeliers, velvet chairs, the smell of money and floor wax. I arrived early and I took a seat in the very back row, exactly where I'd been assigned, and I folded my hands, and I waited. And it wasn't long before Clayton saw me. He came striding back, in a suit that cost more than my car, with a look of pure irritation. He crouched next to my chair and lowered his voice. Dad, what are you doing here? I told you, this is a serious event. There are real collectors here. Please don't embarrass me. I looked at my son, and I said, gently, I just wanted to see your mother's paintings one more time, Clayton, before they go. Something flickered in his face. Not enough. He patted my shoulder like I was a dog and said, fine, just stay back here and stay quiet. Then he went back to the front to laugh with the people he wanted to impress. I heard him, a few minutes later, tell a man beside him, nodding toward me, that's my father. Bless him. He taught art class. He thinks he knows about this stuff. And they chuckled, and they turned away. The auction began. I sat in the back and watched lots come and go, and then the screen changed, and there she was. Lot 40, Morning Field, by Eleanor Ellison. The golden field at dawn. The last thing her hands ever made, glowing up on the wall of that cold grand room in front of strangers who saw an investment. My throat closed. The auctioneer began. We'll start the bidding at $1,000. Clayton, near the front, looked pleased. 1,000. Pocket change, to him. Someone bid. Then someone else. 1,200. 15. It was climbing slowly, the way a small unknown painting climbs. And then, from the back row, an old man in a patched tweed jacket raised his hand and said, clearly, $10,000. The room went quiet, heads turned. Clayton spun around in his seat, his face a mask of confusion. The auctioneer, a young man, hesitated, unsure, but Vivian was standing at the side of the room. And Vivian said, calm and clear, the bid is acknowledged. 10,000 from the gentleman in the back. I could see Clayton's mind working. What was the old fool doing? Where would he even? It didn't matter. Someone else, a real collector who'd suddenly realized this painting might be something, bid 12. I raised my hand. 20,000. A gasp. 25 from a phone bidder. 50, I said. Now the whole room had turned around to look at the shabby old man in the back who was throwing numbers like that. Clayton was on his feet. Dad. He hissed, hurrying up the aisle. Dad, stop it, you don't have, what are you doing? He grabbed my arm. And Vivian's voice cut across the entire hall, cool as glass. Sir, please do not interfere with an active bidder, especially not with this one. Clayton froze. This one? He said. He's my father. He taught high school. Vivian looked at him. And then she looked at the room, and she made a decision that I will be grateful for until the day I die. She said, ladies and gentlemen, many of you have done business with this house for years. Some of you have wondered who the private collector we call Mr. E is. The one whose eye built half the collections in this room. The one who funded the east wing of the museum and asked for no name on it. She gestured to the back row. To me, you are looking at him. I have never heard a room go so silent so fast. You could hear the chandeliers hum. I stood up then, slowly, 74 years old in my patched jacket, with my wife stitching on my elbow, and I looked at my son, whose face had gone the color of old paper. And I said, so, the whole room could hear it, I'll bid $100,000 for lot 40. And I'd like to say something, if the house will allow it. Nobody moved. Vivian nodded. The floor is yours, Mr. Ellison. I looked at that painting up on the wall, the golden field, Eleanor's last morning, and I said, this was painted by my wife. She painted for 50 years and the world never once looked. She sold her work at church sales for the price of a sandwich. And she used to tell me, laughing, I'll be famous when I'm dead. My voice held. I'd promised myself it would hold. 3 weeks before she died, she painted this. It is the finest thing I have ever owned, and I have owned a great many beautiful things. My son found it in a storage room. And he sold it, and 40 years of her mornings, and never once asked me, because he decided his father was a broke old fool who wouldn't understand. I looked at Clayton. He was selling her to buy a boat. The room made a sound. A low, collective sound. The sound a crowd makes when it turns. So I'm going to buy her back, I said. All of her. Every canvas my son put in this sale. Not because I need to win. I could have bought this entire building this morning and not felt it. I'm buying her back because for one afternoon this room full of serious people is finally going to look at Eleanor Ellison the way they should have 50 years ago. She's famous now, Clayton, just like she said. She had to die, and you had to betray me, for it to happen. But she's famous now. Look at them all looking at her. What happened next I will remember until I die. The bidding did not stop. Now that the room knew the shabby man in the back was Mr. E, now that they understood the painter was a real discovery, the serious money woke up. A dealer from Atlanta bid $70,000. A phone bidder went to $90,000. A woman in the third row, a collector I'd sold to years ago, turned around, found my eyes, and gave me a small nod, the nod one true eye gives another, and then she bid $100,000 for Eleanor, not against me, but with me, to push the number up where it belonged. The room had turned into something else entirely. Not a liquidation, a coronation. Eleanor Ellison, dead 4 years, unknown her whole life, was being fought over by the very people who'd never looked at her. I let it climb. I let them see her. And then, when the number was high enough that no one in that room would ever again call her a hobby, I raised my hand one final time and ended it. $140,000. For a church sale painter. My Eleanor. I bought every one of Eleanor's paintings that day. Morningfield went for $140,000. To a bidding war I let run just long enough for the room to understand what she was, and then ended. The proceeds, by consignment law, went to Clayton, the seller. He made his money. More than he ever dreamed. And it was the emptiest money a man has ever held, because he made it in front of 300 people who now knew exactly what he'd done and who he'd done it to. He got his boat money. He lost everything a boat can't buy. I want to tell you what I did about the rest. Because there's the rest. Clayton did not know that the father he'd written off was worth more than his wildest guess. He'd sold a corner of a collection worth millions, thinking it was junk. After that day, I changed my will. I had been going to leave Clayton the collection. All of it. The paintings, the museum endowment, the whole quiet fortune I'd built with my good eye over 50 years. I changed it. It goes to the museum now, in Eleanor's name, finally with her name on the door. And a good portion goes to my granddaughter, Clayton's daughter, Maddie. Maddie is 19. She was at the auction that day. She'd come because she loved her grandmother's paintings, the only one in the family who did. When I stood up in the back, she was the first one on her feet, and she was crying, and she pushed through that whole crowd to stand next to me while I spoke. She held my arm the entire time. Afterward, she said, "Grandpa, I always thought Grandma's paintings were the most beautiful things in the world. I just didn't know I was allowed to say it out loud." I told her she's allowed. I told her that's the whole job of having a good eye. To say out loud what's beautiful, especially when no one else will. I did not send Clayton to jail. There was no crime, only a betrayal, and betrayal answers to a different court. I did not scream at him. I have not, in fact, spoken to him much since. He's called a few times. Mostly, I think, because he did the math on what he lost, and it keeps him up at night. That's not my problem to solve. A man who sells his mother to buy a boat has to live in the house he built. The museum unveiled the Eleanor Ellison wing last month. Her name is on the door in brass letters, the way it always should have been. They hung Morningfield there for the opening, on loan from me, in the center of the main room, with a soft light on it. I stood in the back that day, too. Old habit. And I watched strangers stop in front of my wife's field and go quiet, the way I went quiet in front of those haystacks when I was 16. One young woman stood there for 20 minutes. She didn't know I was watching. She didn't know I was anybody. She just couldn't leave the painting. And I thought, there it is, Eleanor, there's the thing you said you'd never get to see. Somebody who can't walk away from your field. You were right. You got famous when you were dead. I only wish I could have handed you the ticket. Maddie comes by every Sunday now. She's studying art history, which delights me more than I can say. She sits with me and we go through Eleanor's other canvases one at a time, and I tell her the story of each morning her grandmother painted. She's going to inherit the eye, I think. You can't teach it, but you can pass it if the person is paying attention. Maddie pays attention. She's the proof that the whole family didn't fail. Just the loudest branch of it. Vivian retired from the auction house last spring. I took her to dinner to thank her for the call that changed everything. She waved it off. She said, "Mr. Ellison, I've watched you buy beautiful things for 30 years and give them all away. Making that call was the first chance I ever got to give something back to you." Decent people, they find each other in the end. I hung Morningfield back over my fireplace after the exhibit. I couldn't bear to look at it for 4 years. Now I look at it every morning with my coffee. The light comes in the window at the same angle she painted. Some mornings I swear the field is real. Here's what I want to leave you with, and then I'll let you go. The world is full of quiet people it has decided are worthless. The old teacher, The woman painting fields no one buys, the shabby man in the back row. And nearly every one of them is holding something the loud people cannot see. A good eye, a great gift. A room full of beauty with no name on the door do not measure a person by the shine on their shoes. My son did that his whole life, and he sold a masterpiece for a boat, and he never even knew what was in his own father's hands. Look closer at the quiet ones. They are almost always the ones who own the real thing. If you like this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being part of this family.